Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this webcast presented by Penn State University. My name is Jeff Kovacs. I'm a partner with Cohen and Company. We're an accounting and advisory firm across the Midwest and the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast. And I direct our firm's technology and life science practice. I'm also the chairman of this year's Invent Penn State Venture and IP Conference Coaches Committee. And I've been doing this for many, many years with Penn State and in other roles. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share some ideas about how to pitch with all of you today, and want to thank all of you for attending. I'd like to thank Fox Rothschild for being the Invent Penn State Venture and IP Bootcamp sponsor. We would not be here without their generosity, and especially during this difficult year, we are very grateful for their participation. If you have any questions for me during the event, please use the Zoom Q&A function, and I will certainly do my best to try to respond to your questions.
I missed that in the script. Sorry, Jeff. We are broadcasting on YouTube. We will save your questions for your coaches, and they will hopefully be able to answer. If they can't, please reach out to us. Sorry about that.
No worries. Thank you, Ian. All right. So today's agenda for the next 30 minutes, we'll talk a little bit about the format of a pitch. And I'd like to spend some time going over what I call the basics and some of the details that you may or may not want to put into your pitch. And then we'll wrap up our discussion talking about some difference makers, some of the do's, some of the don'ts, and some of the things that your coaches are going to be looking for to help you during this process. So the comments that I make here today are my own. You will get lots of feedback from lots of advisors, and this is just my perspective after seeing thousands and thousands of pitches over my career. So I've tried to formulate this into something that I hope that you find meaningful to you. These guidelines are just that. They're general, and so therefore you need to tailor your pitch to your particular product, to your company, and especially to the type of investor that you're looking to sell your company and yourself to. You should always seek counsel from others that you trust. Getting input from a variety of sources and from your coaches is critically important. But you can also be overwhelmed with some of that advice. So I would also counsel you to be discerning with the advice that you do get. Do your homework, be engaged, be involved, and you'll find this to be a very fun and rewarding process for you. So the format of the pitches at the venture fair portion are going to flow just like this. So that you as an entrepreneur and an investor will get connected directly, very similar to what we're going to do after this discussion. You will have a 10-minute total time limit. The first minute will be spent with an investor introduction, and they'll talk a little bit about their investment thesis, the types of companies that they like to invest in, the size, the stage, all of those kind of things. It's very important that they give you a sense of who they are and what they're looking to invest in. And then you'll be able to go into your 5-minute pitch. 5 minutes might sound like a lot of time. It really isn't. 5 minutes is going to go by incredibly fast. And that's why we're here today to talk about crafting the appropriate elements that you need to get into your pitch. After that, there will be a 4-minute Q&A session between you and the investor. And as you'll hear me say several times, the goal through this 5-minute presentation and the 4-minute Q&A is to advance the discussion to the next stage. And you're not looking to close an investment round at that table. It will go on, and so you are there to set the stage for the next level of discussion. In this virtual environment, PowerPoint can be very helpful for you to try to get your presentation across. So that will be at your discretion. Sometimes some entrepreneurs can get their points across in a conversational tone. Some of them like to have it in PowerPoint. That's really at your discretion, but the virtual aspect of this does lend itself to a PowerPoint presentation. There will be no moderator in that discussion with you and the investor. It will just be the two of you. And then again, it's at the discretion of that investor if they want to follow up with you or not. So let's just talk about some of the basics. You know, these 5-minute pitches generally are going to have some element of these bullet points, and I'm going to go through each one of them in some level of detail over the next few minutes. The key points that I'm going to talk about are italicized in the slides to help you identify which ones, at least in my opinion, I think are more important than others. But the key is always is to tailor the pitch to your audience. You need to be able to understand who the investor is, what they're looking for, and get your pitch framed in such a way that that investor is going to be interested in investing in your company. I can't stress this next bullet point enough. Your presentation needs to be concise. It needs to be clear. It must be understandable and in plain English. Many of you are technologists that are going to be pitching, and you really need to stay away from technical language that is difficult to understand. It's really important for you to understand that the investor on the other side of the table from you may or may not be a technologist. You should assume that they are not. They're highly intelligent, highly experienced. They know what they're looking for, and you need to be able to convey who your company is and what problems you're trying to solve clearly and concisely. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. The details. You don't have a lot of time to get into the details. As I said, 5 minutes will go by quickly, and the goal here is to move the conversation to the next stage. So let's go through some of the basics. Let's start with an overview. I think the most critical thing that you can do early on is to convey exactly what the company does and what is the big problem that your company is attempting to solve. I can't tell you how many pitches I've sat through over the years where we are minutes into the pitch and I still have no idea what they do. I have no idea what problem they're trying to solve. I have no idea what's unique about them. I have no idea what differentiates them from other companies that I may have seen or even invested in. This is a key point for you to be able to very clearly articulate in non-technical language what your company is doing and what big problem you're attempting to solve and how you're attempting to solve it differently than anybody else in the market. If you're unable to do that, I guarantee you, you will have a frustrated investor on the other side of that table from you, and it is highly unlikely that they are going to want to invest in your company. So they need to understand what that big problem is. They're looking for big opportunities. They're looking for companies that can solve big problems. They want to understand, even if you're a very young company that is just starting, they want to see what that scale is going to look like. They need to visualize what the future of that investment is going to look like at some point where there's a liquidity event in their future and your future. And so if you do nothing else in your pitch, please spend time to make sure that that big problem is articulated clearly and concisely. The next area to talk about is the addressable market. This is another area that I think is often not addressed appropriately in pitches. And by that, what I mean is that companies truly don't always identify what the real addressable market is for their product or their service. And I think you need to be clear with an investor exactly what that addressable market is. It can't be too broad. It can't be too narrow. It's got to be the exact market that you think ultimately is going to be the buyer for your product or services. And you should have some sense of what percentage of that market that you can plan to capture. Many of us have sat through lots of pitches where we hear an entrepreneur talk about capturing 50% of a particular market. And the reality is that's just unrealistic. Some of these markets, if they are big enough, you only need to capture a few percentage points of a particular market for an investor to be interested in investing in your company. And so please spend the time to actually understand what that market is and be able to articulate that to a potential investor. Please also convey to them why your company has that high growth potential. Why is it different than other companies? Why can you get it to scale? Why have you found that narrow path perhaps to scalability and solving that problem that nobody else has been able to reach at that point. So after we talk about the addressable market, then I think it's important to go into some depth about the products and services. So you can now link what your product or service is to the big problem and the addressable market. But I would do this through a storytelling approach so that the investor understands why a user needs to care about your product or service. If you have any empirical evidence around interactions with potential customers, potential buyers of that product or that service, and why do they care? Why are they asking for this? Why do they need this? And being able to convey that to an investor is critical. As we already mentioned, the key differentiating features of the product or service must come through in that conversation, and helping the investor understand what the major product milestones are is critically important for them to understand not just how you scale, but also more importantly, the level of capital that's going to be needed to help you scale over that period of time. And they're going to sit there and they're going to want to understand if it's realistic or not. They're really evaluating your ability to solve that big problem at scale over some period of time. They also would like to know, what have you learned? This is not a linear process. This is a very iterative process. And they want to understand what you've learned through early MVPs, through early delivery of some services. I would not necessarily in a 5-minute pitch recommend that you demonstrate the product or service unless it's something you can do quickly and it's something that is incredibly necessary for you to be able to demonstrate what the product or the service does. I would recommend that you keep that demonstration for a later date once you've been able to further the conversation to the next time you're able to meet with that investor. The next area that I think is really important for you to focus on is marketing and customer acquisition. Having some sense of how you plan to market the product, the service, and your customer acquisition strategy is critically important. Understanding what market research you've done. Have you done any sort of surveys, any sort of research, have you gained any sort of evidence that will help an investor understand the breadth and the depth of how you plan to market this to your particular customers? Do you have any sense of what your cost is of acquiring a customer? What does the sales cycle look like? Is it a short sales cycle? Is it a long sales cycle? All of those are critically important to helping an investor understand how you're taking that product or service to market, what it's going to cost, what the margins are going to be, what the ROI is going to be as you take that to market. So doing that homework, being prepared to answer those tough questions that an investor is going to ask you, again, another very important part of your pitch. And then you can spend a little bit of time talking about traction. What kind of success have you had to date? What do sales look like? What do the number of customers look like? What kind of traffic, if you're more of a software company, are you getting to your website? Things like that. Especially what type of customer feedback have you received? What do they like about what you're doing? And more importantly, what don't they like about what you're doing? And how have you addressed that? How have you learned? The investor wants to see how coachable you are. They want to see how you react to negative feedback. Can you react positively? Can you react quickly? Can you turn that into a positive? All of those things are very important clues into who you are as an entrepreneur from the perspective of them wanting to invest in your company. And how can you accelerate traction? Can you accelerate it through funding? Can you accelerate it through talent? Can you accelerate it through other means? And how are you going to get that traction? So to the extent that you can spend some time on that in that 5 minutes, I would encourage you to do that. It's always important to an investor to understand who you as an entrepreneur perceive your competition to be. I've said this many times. I wish I had a nickel for every pitch that I've sat through where an entrepreneur will say, we have no competition in our space. That quite frankly just isn't true. It comes across honestly as being very naive. Sometimes just the status quo is competition. People just doing what they've been doing instead of buying your product or your service to do something differently. It could be a competitor, could be a barrier for people wanting to use your product or services. So what is that competitive advantage? How do you differentiate from your competition? What advantages do you have over your competition? What barriers to entry have you created to others that are proposing similar products and services? Even if they're in the market, are there things that you're doing as an organization that are preventing others from gaining on you from a competitive perspective? Another area that you don't necessarily need to spend a lot of time in, but will come up in the Q&A section, is the risks, right? Every organization has risk. There are lots and lots of things that can go wrong. And as a founder, as an entrepreneur, you really need to focus on all the things that can go wrong. You know what they are because you're facing them every day. I've listed, several out here on the slide. There are many, many others. These are the ones that are probably most common, but I would encourage you, if there are one or two significant risks that that you are addressing as an entrepreneur to try to move your organization forward, it's perfectly acceptable to include that in the pitch to talk about how you're overcoming those risks. But I would be prepared to address these risks in the Q&A section and beyond, certainly in further discussions with a potential investor. The next area is intellectual property. It's important for an investor to understand what IP you actually have, if any. Do you have patents? Do you have copyrights, trademarks, trade names, trade secrets, domain names? Anything that can create a competitive advantage for you with respect to your competitors. And what have you done to protect that intellectual property? Or have you received advice from counsel that perhaps not protecting that property is a better strategy in some cases? I think just being able to articulate the existence of the IP and the need or the lack of need to protect that IP is a necessary part of that conversation with an investor, so that especially for products that are highly technical and highly specialized, and the intellectual property creates a competitive advantage for you, that's the value proposition. And an investor really needs and wants to know that. And they want to know, what have you done to investigate that intellectual property hasn't infringed on any other's intellectual property at that point. So, and then the founders and the team. Very often I see pitches where the founders and team are, the slide is near the front of the pitch deck. And I would encourage you to not necessarily move that towards the front in most cases. Again, not always, but the founders and team are important for an investor to understand what's in place, but sometimes just as important to understand what's not in place as well. You can't be expected, especially as an early stage company, to have all of the pieces to the company in place. And it's perfectly fine to say that there are other team members that we need to bring on board. And perhaps part of the funding request that you're asking for is to be able to bring on some of those key team members. So understanding who the founders are, what their particular skill set is, what they bring to the organization, that depth of experience is critical to help an investor understand what is really there in terms of talent is really important, but maybe more so around the uniqueness of the team, both individually and collectively. What does the team bring sort of synergistically together that other teams may not have from a competitive perspective, and how do you bring that team together to solve that big problem in that unique way. I think sometimes having that discussion from a storytelling perspective around what motivated you as a founder to create this company and to try to scale this company and solve that problem can be a very compelling story and a great way to explain who the founders and who the team might be. Another area that you don't have to spend a lot of time on is the finance side of it. I think it's important at a very, very high level to share a little bit about how you've capitalized the company to date, whether it's friends and family rounds or seed rounds, whatever stage you happen to be at, and what that structure looks like, helping them understand, are you a limited liability company or are you a C corporation, just so they have an idea of the type of structure that they might be investing into. But I think more importantly is just understanding the uses of the funds and understanding where the need is, where the spend needs to be to reach the next milestone. You don't need to have very detailed financial projections in a pitch. In fact, I think it could be distracting. And one of the other things we often see in pitches are projections that are extremely optimistic. I will tell you that investors will discount those sort of overly optimistic projections very, very quickly. It can actually be a hindrance to credibility. It can allow an investor to think that maybe you don't have a realistic understanding of how to operate the company, how to scale the company, how to reach the next milestones. So I think it's important for them to understand, again, the uses of the funds to get you to each milestone so that they have a sense of what the life cycle of the company looks like in terms of funding, milestones, and obviously, ultimately, some liquidity event for them. And that really plays into this next slide here. It's those operational milestones so that they can sort of work backwards. From the time they want to invest in your company, they're thinking about how they're going to exit your company and what an exit event might look like. And then they start working backwards in terms of different rounds of funding so that they have an idea of whether or not your company is worthy of an investment from them. So please keep that in mind as you're putting together the financial slides and discussion around that. The liquidity slide, very often in sort of seed stage, early stage investments really isn't all that meaningful. Who the likely acquirers are today will change probably very dramatically over time as the company grows, scales, pivots, iterates multiple times. So just having a sense of who some of the larger strategic acquirers are in the market or financial acquirers, whether it's an IPO or more likely an M&A event, it's not something that you have to spend a lot of time on, but if you have some clarity or visibility around that, certainly is something that you can include. But again, be mindful of the 5 minutes that you have to pitch, and you may not have time to get to something like that. So those are the basics. That was a lot. And I'm sure Ian and the team would be happy to share these slides with you after today's event. And hopefully there's something of value in there for these slides. But I think that the next portion is really important to focus on. This goes sort of beyond the pitch. And one very important piece I'd like to share with you and leave with you is that, in my opinion, some of the most effective pitches are the ones that are really telling a story. They're not a series of slides that are just going from, just like I did, from one topic to another topic to another topic. The best pitches are the ones that weave it all into a story, that talk about why this big problem exists and why it's meaningful to you and why you're uniquely designed to solve that problem and what you need to solve that problem and everything we just talked about. What you're trying to do here is create a connection between you and that investor. You're trying to get that investor to care. You want them to understand why a purchaser of that product or that service would care. It's emotional. You're trying to create that emotional connection with the investor to want them to want to be part of your team. to invest in you, not just financially, but emotionally, and with all their time and talents as well. And so sharing things that you've learned, your experiences by working with customers, those breakthrough moments, those aha moments, those types of stories stick in the memory. They create that emotion that will want that investor to come back to you and learn more and move that discussion to the next stage. And if you can get them to care, then I think you stand a good chance of getting them into deeper conversations. So in this 5-minute pitch, what you're attempting to do is create the headlines. You're trying to just get their attention. You don't have to tell them everything. You're just trying to get their attention. It's like picking up, if back in the days when we had newspapers, picking up the newspaper, seeing a headline and wanting to read more. That's the analogy that we're shooting for here. So again, you're just trying to get across, what do you produce better, faster, more effectively, more innovatively, cheaper, whatever combination all of that is, better than anybody else? How do you serve people? Those first lines need to be strong. You need to grab their attention. If you don't grab their attention in the first minute or two, you will lose them. And that's unfortunate. So practice that. When you're doing your pitches, practice grabbing their attention. Practice that communication of why you're trying to solve the big problem and why your company is unique. What you're trying to do in this time period, again, is distill so much information in your entire branding concept down to just a few minutes, so that you're encouraging them to want to hear more, and they then give you the permission to give them more details. But it's got to be clear cut. It's got to be concise. It's got to be a very tight presentation. So just to wrap this up, here's some do's and don'ts. So the do's: use, as we said earlier, use some straightforward and easy to understand language. Tailor your pitch to the audience. And again, we're providing the appetizer, not the main course, right? This is just the appetizer. Explain how what you've done, product or service, has already produced some results. Explain why it's uniquely different and why that difference actually matters. Why do people care about that difference? Help them understand the path to customer acquisition. Who are the customers? Can you articulate that? What do you need to do to reach those customers? And will they buy what you're selling? Again, I can't tell you how many times I've seen a pitch. It's a great idea, a great business, a great technology in search of a customer. And so spend the time to understand who your customers really are. Understand what it's going to cost to get that customer, and really important to understand how sticky that relationship is once you've acquired that customer. As I said in the beginning, anticipate the tough questions. You're going to get lots of tough questions. Have your coaches, have others coach you through the tough questions and get comfortable answering them. Instill a sense of urgency that you need to move, you need to grow, you need to scale, you need their partnership, their capital, and their time and talents to help you grow and scale this company. They need to see the passion that you're bringing to your company, and you need to be genuine and authentic in your presentation to them, because if you're not, they will see through it instantly. They've been through this over and over and over again, and they have very, very refined filters. So the do nots: do not provide sweeping statements. You have to find the sweet spot in your communication. And don't ever waste time explaining the obvious. There are many things that are obvious. Stay away from that. Explain the things that need explaining. The PowerPoint presentation, again, you can have it, but storytelling, if you're going to use it, weave it into a story all the way through all of those slides that I walked you through. As we said again in the very beginning, don't be overly technical, just enough so that you can convey the concepts and problems solved. If you're too technical, you will lose that potential investor. Don't use the technical jargon. Don't provide too many details. Again, again, your goal is to get to the next discussion, and don't provide an overabundance of information. So again, I want to thank Fox Rothschild for sponsoring today's event. I hope you found our discussion today helpful and worthwhile. We're here to help you through this entire process. And I'm going to turn it back over to Ian Shako. Ian's the Director of Marketing and Information Technology at Tykes Inc. He's also chairman of the Invent Penn State Venture IP Selection Committee. So Ian is going to walk us through the next steps of the Venture Connection and what you can expect for the rest of the afternoon. So thank you all very much for your time. And Ian, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeff. So what Jeff just demonstrated to you there is an example of a very good pitch and kind of how yours should be formatted. He's very good at this. What I'm about to demonstrate is what you shouldn't do. I'm not the best presenter. However, I do have some necessary information for you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Jeff, can you stop sharing your screen, please? There we go. See, I'm already starting off well. All right. Jordan, if you could just give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. Just the Zoom reactions. Anyway, I'm sure you can. Okay. All right. So we're going to start off with the home page here. As you can see right now, it has the YouTube link where this is being streamed. I'm obviously not going to display that now, otherwise we'll get some, I'm not sure if we'll get some sort of camera weirdness. When an event isn't going on, you will see that there's a countdown on this page that just counts you down to the next all group event. This won't count you down to your meetings. This is the page where we go when everybody is together and watching whatever presentation we have going on. So that is what you will do on the home page. When you log in, this is where you land. So if an event's going on, you're right in that event. The next page we're going to talk about is probably the most important one, certainly for today. This is your schedule page. So on this page, you will find your events and meetings. And so the differentiator between an event and a meeting is an event is something where everybody's in it. A meeting is something that you're going to be having with groups of people. So for today, for instance, you'll see on mine, you'll see I have a 3-hour meeting with myself. This is my daily talk to myself and sit in a room alone. I just didn't add anybody else to the meeting. So you'll see, you should, on your screens, entrepreneurs, you will have either 1 or 2 meetings with coaches today. Coaches, you will have a full slate of 3 starting in 10 minutes from now, and they will go from 2:45 until 3:30. So the events become active about 5 minutes prior to the event, and they turn green. When they turn green, you can click the join button and you will be placed into call. If you completed the pre-call screening, you'll know this because at the top of above this video, if you see a red bar that says complete your pre-call, check, you didn't do it yet. That is just so that you know, that your system is compatible with the Open Talk network, which is what we use to facilitate these meetings. You'll see beside each meeting, you have a reschedule and cancel option. Those are disabled for this event. However, for all meetings for the regular event, you will have the opportunity to reschedule any meetings that you're placed into, including Venture Connection meetings if you can't make them. Though, especially with the Venture Connection meetings, I recommend that you keep them if at all possible. You know, the investors are ready for that time frame, you're ready for that time frame. So I think it's the most likely that things will happen. You can see on this meeting, now it's just saying me, but for you, you'll see that there are multiple, there should be multiple people there. If you click the one that isn't you, you will be able to see their attendee profile. That is important for today. I would recommend that any of the coaches you're meeting with today, click on their attendee profile and just take down their information. Once this event wraps today, that information, if they're not registered for the general event, you won't be able to find it again. The entrepreneurs will definitely register for the general event. The coaches will likely be, but may not be. So just so you have that information available, because we recommend that you do a little more work between now and the actual conference, you know, these are 15 minutes, get you used to the venture connection format, but that doesn't, that isn't necessarily, you know, that isn't necessarily enough time. So we recommend that you reach out to your coach, or coach reach out to your entrepreneur, and make sure that you dedicate a little more time to it. Time zones can be adjusted in the corner up here. You can see just if you're not in the East Coast area, that will adjust all of the times for you so that they are appropriate to your time zone. And I already said, go ahead and click on the name there, and that will take you to the attendee profile. Next up, we're going to talk about, so if I were to click this join button, it would take me into a meeting interface. However, as I am using my camera right now, it would just break. So I instead took a, oh, that's on the wrong screen. I took a screenshot. That's a great picture of me. I took a screenshot of myself so I can walk you through the interface that you'll be seeing in just about 8 minutes. So you'll see on the side over here, you will see a camera button. If it is green, it is on. If it is red, it is off and nobody can see you. This little arrow next to it, if you have multiple cameras attached to your device, that will allow you to select the camera. So you just click it and select the camera you want to use. The microphone below, same thing. Green means go, red is off. So nobody will be able to hear you. If it is red, click the arrow beside it and you can select the microphones. You can select the microphone from the drop-down. If you are having trouble with attendees hearing you today, when you click this arrow, you will also see switch to call audio. If you click switch to call audio, you will enter a phone number into the box that appears and a call will be placed to you. That way, and then your audio will be placed into the meeting. This is a workaround. I find it's more stable with the audio. Sometimes, you know, your Bluetooth connection to your computer to the OpenTalk network, there's just a lot of failure points. So especially today, if you have any issues, switching to call audio is a viable option. Also, if the system detects that you don't have a microphone attached or something's wrong with the microphone attached, it will also prompt you to switch to that. That way you can at least have the meeting via call today. Below that, you will see this symbol in red. This is the screen share symbol. Go ahead and click that. It will then prompt you to select which screen you'd like to share, and that is how you can share your presentation today. And then finally at the bottom, you have the end button that takes you back to the schedule page and removes you from the conference. One other item on this, you will see at the bottom here, the countdown for the time remaining. It turns green, it's green when you're above 50% of the meeting remaining, orange when you are above 25%, and then 25% and below is red, and that will let you know. It also shows you, it also visually tells you how much time is remaining in the meeting. That just keeps everybody honest and moving on time. All right, that covers the meeting interface. Next up, we have the attendee page. I'll go ahead and click that. This one's pretty quick. These next few I should be able to whip through pretty quickly so we make sure we have you on time for your first meeting. These are, you'll see today, what you're seeing when you click it is everybody who's in attendance in the boot camp. When the boot camp is over today and you log off, if you were to log back on, you will see that it has switched over to the general. The general conference attendees will be available 1 week prior to the event, or unless you're a sponsor, and then they will be available 2 weeks prior to the event. If you select any random person, so for instance here, we'll select Larry Miller. You can see the full company profile there. If they've uploaded a headshot, you'll see that there. And this is just where you get all your information on the attendees. Also, what will be available during the conference but is not available today is a button below here above their biography that will say request meeting. That will bring you to the meeting scheduler where you can try to arrange a meeting with this person. I believe that is it for this page. So we're going to move on to the companies page. If you go to the companies page, you will see today, this is all the companies that are participating in Bootcamp. However, this is not all the companies that are participating in general. We have a few more. But if you click on any one, we'll click on Breathe Easy here. You can see all the information that is available to a general attendee. If you want to update this information at any time, when you log in as an entrepreneur, you will be prompted with two options. One that is attendee portal, and one I believe says entrepreneur application. Click that second entrepreneur application, and you can update anything that appears here at any time. Let's make sure I got everything covered here. Oh, on this page, this is more relevant to my coaches than my entrepreneurs, but if you click the drop down here, you can see you can filter companies by their industry, so you can see whoever falls into whatever industry. Just a little tidbit of information there. Second to last page here is our notifications page. You should have received notifications on your page today that told you you had a meeting arranged with so-and-so at time. And so that is anytime any new meeting is added, a notification will appear here. This is also where we'll release general conference notifications should we need to communicate anything to the audience. You'll see a little red circle above the bell icon here, just like every other social media website. And that's how you know you have a new notification. You click there to see the notification. The last page on my little walkthrough here, and I think I'm doing pretty well on time. The last page here you will see is your attendee information. You can update that at any time on this page and change anything you like. You can upload a new screenshot or delete the current, upload a new headshot or delete the current headshot. Or if you haven't uploaded one so far, you'll see an icon, you'll see something prompting you to upload a headshot if you want. Everything else here is pretty self-explanatory, except for at the bottom, this is the meeting scheduler. If you do not want people to be able to schedule meeting or to request meetings with you during the conference, you can close the meeting scheduler. However, that means you will also you will not be able to reach out and use the meeting scheduler yourself, but I know some people don't want to be bothered, so we give you that option. All right, so just a few quick notes for today. I accidentally scheduled the meetings close together, so 2:45, like right on top of each other, so it ends at 3, next one starts at 3. I will allow breaks in the real Venture Connection. I think it's 2 minutes in between each, and then a longer 5-minute break in the middle of each Venture Connection session during the regular event. I just made that mistake today. I apologize. I will not make that mistake again. Today, so right now, if I pull it up on YouTube, and I will look real quick, I have 51 of you currently watching. That is less than I have registered, so that means that either the coaches aren't watching because they've already gotten Jeff's portion of this and don't feel the need to listen to me, and I don't blame them. But some people may not be on that you have meetings scheduled with. If that is the case, I recommend that you come back to the schedule page and click their name and give them a call at the phone number or shoot them an email and schedule a later time to either coach them or get coached. It's, you know, I can't account for people not being here today. You can call me if you want, but I will just do the exact same thing. So I'm cutting out the middleman here. All right, I'm almost finished, I promise. I'm going to stop my screen share. First off, I just want to remind everybody that they should be working, just work with your coach a little more on the lead up, make sure that you're as prepared as you can be. I want to give a huge thanks to Jeff Kovacs of Cohen and Company. He does this, as you can see, he's a professional, very good, and we really appreciate him sharing his knowledge with us. I would like to thank the coaches committee for volunteering their time to help get you all ready and, you know, stand you the best chance possible of getting investment out of this. And I would like to thank Fox Rothschild for sponsoring today's event. Best of luck to all the entrepreneurs. So I'm going to encourage you now to go to the schedules page and hop in your first meeting, and we will see you all back here April 15th and 16th for the conference. And go ahead and move to your first Venture Connection meeting. Entrepreneurs, you may have a delay before your first one. Thank you, everybody.